Hello, and welcome to another edition of Cracking the Rich Code, the podcast. And I think I just met another new best friend. That's what I love about doing these podcasts. I get to have deep dive conversations with some people that have been in the Cracking the Rich Code book series. And not only are they brilliant thinkers and really smart people from all around the world doing some really wonderful stuff, but they're just really really nice people, and we find that we have so much in common. And I think that's what we kind of miss in society nowadays. We tend to focus on what makes people different instead of looking at what we have in common. And then we realize when we get together in conversations like this, boy, there's so much that we have in common, and we can get along on so many different levels. And that's what happened when I got on the horn with this guy. We started chatting just briefly before we come on, just to make sure the tech's working and all that. And as we're talking, next thing you know, we're laughing and hanging out. And I can't wait to share a beer with this guy at some point. But in the meantime, let's get him on here so you can meet Carlos Hoyos. Carlos is he's a kind of C-suite leadership coach, executive coach, and he's also a business coach and a business consultant. You're going to love this guy. He's just so cheerful, and he's from Brazil, so he's got that really cool accent as well. Let me bring him on. Here comes Carlos Hoyos. Carlos, how you
Hello,
doing today
John.
there?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me. I just love hearing you.
Where this is it's the first time that we've really had an opportunity to talk with each other. I mean, we've seen each other on the masterminds every once in a while, and but we haven't had a chance to really kind of have a conversation until today. And so we got on the call and just started talking the tech, and next thing you know, almost a half an hour has gone by since we got on the call, and we haven't even started recording yet. So I said, I think we better get into what we need to do. So this has been great. So how's everything going for you?
It's pretty good. I'm having a blast here, being part of this podcast. I remember before joining the Cracking the Rich Code book project, and I saw some of my colleagues on, and said, "This must be amazing. This is just so many great people and minds and hearts on this, and being part of this community is just fascinating. I learn every single day, every time I get like one of the chapters. So it's good. So life is good. Thanks for having me.
Life is great. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now you're down in Brazil. I say down
Yes,
because you're south of me in in Pennsylvania.
yes.
How did and I know you do a lot of work internationally. How did you wind up interacting with Jim Britt and coming into this community?
Well, actually, through the Jim Britt's mastermind and some of the colleagues that I actually got, more international work. I got more visibility on this. I was actually recommended by a common colleague that works in BTS. I was telling you, I'm executive coach through BTS, and she recommended me to Jim Britt's mastermind. I got to know Jim Britt. I thought it was like a 15-minute call. We ended up talking like 90 minutes. I don't know. I think we just like talking, just
That's
ourselves.
what
And I
happens.
love actually, we definitely need to schedule one time to have a beer. And so it was interesting. I loved the project, and I joined, and um, I definitely would like to be more present and on the meetings, but time zones and other needs that we have, with kids and businesses, sometimes I cannot be present all the time. But essentially, it was through recommendations. Adriana Gattemeyer, great friend of mine.
Right. And so you wound up coming in volume 16, if I
That's right.
recall, Cracking the Rich Code volume 16. And you had a very interesting title on your chapter, um, which is From Battling Cancer to Global Executive Coach and Business Advisor, Shaping the Transformational Leadership of the Future. So much information is delivered just in that headline, just in that title. And as a former journalist, I was intrigued by that. And I was like, I got to know more about this transformation. And if you don't mind sharing just a little bit about your battle with cancer, and then kind of your advancement from there.
Oh, absolutely, and thanks for the question. Uh, I guess I wanted to have a chapter that people would be interested to read and stay until the end to get, the promise, right? So I think that's sort of the idea. I think got a little bit too long, but when I was 14 years old, I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, a very vicious one, and that definitely shaped my entire mindset in my life. It, I learned later on in my life that that's a type of cancer that it doesn't have a high it it has a high mortality rate, right? So you don't get high chances to survive. Perhaps because I didn't know that I survived. I don't know. I had a lot of great support, and
That
I
does make a
undergone.
difference.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Spirituality, people, friends. That's totally the great support that I had, and that I had I underwent several surgeries, and the main surgery, like the surgery to remove the tumor. And at that time, I didn't get amputated. I ended up amputating later on, like 14 years, 13, 14, 8 years later. Um, I, 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 I kept my leg. But that just after the surgery, I noticed a few things. First thing, I knew that thing was not going to work forever. I knew my life was going to change forever, and it did change forever. And third thing, I realized that with the faith that I have, uh, there must be a better reason. There must be a good reason for this to happen.
Mhm.
And actually, perhaps I understand this every single day because it's a challenge. I end up amputating my leg. And what I think this brings to the table when I'm helping businesses and companies, and executives and leaders in general is just I know people have different kinds of sorrows and sufferings. Um, People have troubles, problems, they have stories, they have memories that affect them all the time. So it's easy just to get into the results, right? It's the bottom line, what are the numbers, the P&L, all that stuff. But all this is just useless if we don't get it to know people. And I understand after many years working in different countries and leading people and coaching people is that you might be a brilliant leader, a brilliant manager, but if you don't self-guide, self-lead yourself through the rough moments, that's not going to fly. Um, so that's why the whole idea of this chapter, and I was mentioning before, like backstage, that say, okay, I think I need to span this to the whole book, and that was what got me going to get to the whole book on this. It was really interesting. So
Yeah,
did I answer
it's
kind of the
amazing
gist of it?
how. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing how just writing a chapter or a page or a little blurb is a catalyst for something bigger. And you have an amazing story to share. So many people would have given up, when they were facing the just the diagnosis at the beginning, and then you went through several years from after the diagnosis and several surgeries, and then it was how many years later that you wound up having to lose your leg?
I think it's about 14 years, 13 to 4 years, not exactly 14 years. It's, there those this accounts are like every 7 years something important happens in your life. There's a transition. So I had cancer when I was 14, and I ended up doing the surgery amputation when I was 28. It was like about that age. And I can tell
Wow.
you that was really hard, but that was not the most difficult things that I undergo to my life. I think my first divorce was a lot worse than the cancer. To me, that was emotional amputation was a lot harder to me than the physical amputation. I think I'm just wired that way. I think I had proper support in that, but I don't think I revisit my life in existence and why we are here when I had cancer. And I had chemo. I lost all the hair in my head. I got very sensible to light. 1 year something in treatment. Very, I almost died when I was in intensive care unit, but it was a reverse one. It's not that I had no defense. Like immune system was really
Right.
low. That was hard, definitely. That was a long, hard period. But to me, my divorce was really hard. And then I get a second divorce. Second divorce was easy, after the first one. And so, and that's every single piece of those things shaped me. And I don't
Yes.
think I would go through all those things. It didn't have a greater purpose. So I can see things in a different perspective after every single time of this. And because of my divorces, when I get some clients that are just burning out and they're working like crazy, and they're working like, I don't know, 67, 8 hours a week, and I ask them, so what's the first thing in your life? And they automatically say, my family. And say, are you sure family is your first place? Let me tell you a story. So because I know where that thing is going, right? So when your work is your priority, it's not your health and yours, your family, you're going to have all sorts of problems later on. And the way I approach work and results is just people have to be well first. So that to me is
Yeah.
transformational because I still see people talking about horrible managers, terrible leaders. They cannot talk directly eye to eye, heart to heart. They send messages that are not clear, and you have to pick it up because they don't have the guts. That's not what I thought, but they don't have the guts to face people and tell, this is what's happening. And I think when you have compassionate for you're compassionate for others, and you can see people on the eye, and you have some sort of understanding of, at the end everybody's going to die. The process is a lot more important than the result. So to
Yes.
me, self
Yeah.
leadership is essentially the key thing, the absolute key thing for doing things. And it's not only mindset, because I can have a great mindset, but I don't have goals. If I don't create the steps and I don't follow the vision, I have a beautiful mindset, but I don't achieve anything. So that's to me why self leadership is the most important thing, at least in my life. And that's what I, put in the chapter, and it became a book.
Yeah, and that's exactly the same focus. We have a very similar focus on life, and because we see so many uh, bad bosses, people who wind up in leadership positions who really, first of all, ever they don't get trained on how to be a leader, or they don't have the right mindset for it. A lot of people that I've seen get promoted, they get promoted just because they have the seniority, because they've been around, they achieved some level of education or whatever, and then they wind up in a leadership position, but they have no idea how to relate to other people, or how to relate to other
Yeah.
people in that kind of a boss employee kind of environment. And we see that happen quite often. And I was a bullied kid in school. And when I came out into the workforce and I started seeing bullying behavior going on there too, there was a part of me that kicked in the background and said, "Nah, this is not going to work here." And so my whole career has been focused on helping the little guy be able to tell their story, realize that they matter and they make a difference, so that they can kind of overcome the overwhelming influence of these bad bosses. And I'm not saying bosses are bad all over. We got good ones and bad. I learned from some really amazingly good ones over the years too. And I
Yeah.
think like you, like me, you observe these behaviors, and you see what I know, how I felt working for that person, and how they made me feel, and what that did for my motivation. And I looked at, but both good and both pros and cons, and I chose which behaviors I was going to emulate, and that's what became the self leadership. Right, focus on our behavior, how we interact with other people, and all of that. Uh, those essential skills that we need in order to be able to go forward. The bottom line will happen one day, way or the other, but it's not going to get there if you can't lead. and you can't lead if you can't lead yourself. So yeah, the first thing to do is
Absolutely.
look in that mirror. I love this.
Yeah. One thing that I like to explore, and whenever I have the chance, I tell leaders about that. As leaders or responsible for a business unit or business owners, whatever, we have in a position of influence from the top.
Mhm.
We have, I don't know, 10 times, 20 times more responsibility or obligation to be self centered and to have emotional intelligence and maturity. But we cannot expect
Yes.
people that are in lower ranks that they have that, especially younger people, because variety of reasons, and this has been studied, they are not going to be at the same level. I mean, we have, I don't know how this is in US, but in Brazil, Latin America, we have high records of anxiety and depression. Brazil is number one and number two either in the world or in Latin America with anxiety or depression. It's just horrible. So as leaders, we cannot expect that people that are coming to the workforce or they're there and they are afraid to to be fired or need to get something done because they're going to be assessed in the next 360 degrees or feedback session to be at the same level. So we have to create what's called now psychological safety, and this is like a
Yes.
continuum. In one side, you have psychological safety for people that still have not mature emotional intelligence. And on the other side, you have people that have to be, thick skinned and rough because of their work that don't need all the, careful talking and communication because sometimes, especially when you're in, you go through the ranks that people don't have time to create the context. They just say, we need this for tomorrow. Um, and that's a dance, that's a balance. I mean, people have different
It is.
levels of emotional intelligence, they have different tolerances of impact. So you got to know the people.
And people who are in leadership positions need to be able to modify how they interact with people based on who those people are and how those people need to learn. You
Yeah.
know, you'll have people that you are very independent. You can just give them a general direction and let them, and empower them to do what they have to do. Let them go and they get the job done and they, astound the world. There are other people that need that extra attention, that hand holding, that very clear line by line, do it this way kind of thing. And if you manage the independent type person with that micromanaging skill, focus, you're going to kill
Yeah.
their motivation and they're not going to be there.
Exactly.
And if you give too much independence for the person who needs that guidance, then you're going to lose it. So there's a lot of intuition that goes on there uh, as leaders, and I think what you're doing is so needed, especially for people who are getting up there in the C-suite, because they wind up getting so separated from the work side and completely lose that connection, and they forget that these people are human beings. They
Yeah.
they have things going on in their life, and they have different ways of learning and different ways to stay motivated.
I saw this morning, I was listening to a meeting this morning, and I could definitely tell you who was present, who was not present in the call.
Yeah.
Not because they have special powers, just observing how people act and react. And it was
Hmm.
really almost laughable. One of the people, um, the person was asking questions and was not waiting for the other person to answer and start interrupting. I always say, don't you want the other person to answer you? And and that thing is I think people got confused about this because how it's used the executive presence. Um, I don't get into the executive part of it. I just got into presence. The most important thing is skill to be. in connection with human beings. Doesn't matter which part you have in under relationships, is business or professional or personal. You got to know the other person. And I'm not able to know John in front of me if I'm inside of my head. So I can be
Right.
physically present, but I'm not emotionally available, not cognitively focused. I might be concerned the
Yeah.
past and present. And because of, dopamine addiction and cell phones, there's so many things coming out. People are not trained for doing this anymore. So the span of attention is
No.
really short. And then they don't wonder why people don't understand they're talking. And they don't understand because you're not talking to them in your style that they need. And they say,
Yeah,
well,
you're
but they
talking to
have
them,
to
you're not
learn.
talking with them.
That's it. They're not present.
How many times are you're getting into a conversation and you're not really having a conversation because one of you is, instead of listening to the other person, they're just waiting for their chance to talk again.
It's,
They're preparing their next thing.
I
How
must,
would you
yeah,
respond? I was doing a leadership class for a bunch of frontline supervisors in a blue collar environment,
right.
and the one guy sat back and he looked at me like this, and arms crossed, his stern look on his face, and all that, and he says, "It's not my job to motivate my employees. We give them a paycheck for that." How would you respond to that?
I would like to know a little bit more about the context. I believe that everybody is responsible for his or her own motivation in a sense, but I don't think we, as bosses, need to be jerks with them. So we demotivate them, because one thing is just things are flat and you can get out of unmotivation to become motivated. The other thing is that you're well and your manager or boss just motivates you. It just like puts you in the ground.
Yeah.
I heard yesterday in a personal conversation, this person was telling about something that some of the employees had an empathic and volunteer idea of something they created, the initiative to do something nice for the clients. And the manager, instead of recognizing it, said, this is wrong because this has 4 systems, then we need 5 systems. No compliment, only bad news. So,
Just
you
shut it
know,
down.
yeah. So it's one thing is you have to help the person get out of their own, bad humor. I think we have to be self-started, right? But the other thing is just putting them down. So when I see the position like this, is I can infer, or I think about different things that might be going on this person, because this person, he is self motivated or she's self motivated, and he or she does not understand why people cannot get self motivated. I
Right.
thought that during long periods of time, and then lately, probably the last 2 years, I learned that most of what we do is like a repetition of our previous mental structure when we were kids,
Yes.
teenagers, and even though if you're not broken, right, we're still repeating this pattern. So some people need external validation all the time. Some people don't need that. And that has nothing to do if they are capable with generation X, Y, Z, or Delta, or whatever. This is their
No, it
upbringing.
doesn't. Yeah.
And then I don't think it's the person responsibility to motivate this person, but I think it's responsibility of him or her to know the people, to understand what works and what does not work. Because for some
That's
people,
exactly
say
it.
just back to work, that is motivational. For some people, got back to work, oh, all they care is work. For some people, work. For some people, it does not work. So it's not responsibility to
Right.
say, hey, come on, let's do it. But you have to understand the team, the people,
Yeah.
to know how to communicate in a nurturing way, because people have the same language. Let's say we're you speak English, I'm trying to speak English, right? We're trying to communicate the same language, but I need different verbiage than you do to feel well, right? Because we have different
Right.
upbringings. So once you start understanding that, you go beyond the facade of the badge. There's a heart there. It's a story. There's a drama. There's problems in the family, uh, broken hearts,
Yeah,
broken
you
families.
don't ever know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you never know. You never really know. You can assume people are broken in one way or the other. That's a much better approach than assuming that everything is
yeah.
okay.
If you treat everybody with compassion and grace and understand that humanity element of it, then you can be much more successful. And the whole thing is right. We can't motivate other people. Saying go back to work, that's not a motivation. There's not. We just do not have the power to motivate people because motivation is personal. It's inside, right? Every one of us is individual, just like you said. But what we can do is we can create an environment that encourages them to find their motivation. And that's the best we can do. And look at this. What did I tell you at the beginning? I said this is going to go really, really fast. We're down to about 4 minutes left, and it's just been absolutely insane. We talked about a bunch of stuff, and I want to remind people that you can go back and listen to this and play it back over and over because there's a lot of really golden nuggets in what Carlos has been saying throughout this whole thing. Carlos, I would be remiss if I did not mention your podcast, the Elite Leader podcast. So, just give me a brief idea of what you cover in that podcast and encourage people to listen to it.
Sure. Well, thank you for this opportunity. I started podcasting over 10 years ago, and I had that many different incarnations and styles of podcasting. And then I realized that talking to smart people, brilliant leaders, executives, board members was probably the fastest way to add value to my clients, to my community, to audience, and to myself, being selfish, right? So I've been doing this for over 10 years. And in this February, I started doing this in English because I have people that, I love you and your work, but I cannot understand anything you say. So, okay, so let's get other people that they can understand. And the whole idea is to talk to people that have strategic leadership positions. So essentially, they're some influencers, consultant, coaches. We have board members. We have a C-suite, and the idea is to have strategic food for our thoughts. So how we can be better at the strategic level. So we end up talking about multiple different facets of business and leadership, how to become more compassionate with people, how AI can work for the better, and how we can thrive during challenging times. So that's the kind of thing we talk. And lo and behold, we've been talking about very profound things and like being nice, the importance of being nice to people, things like that.
That's really what it comes down to. Yeah. Yeah. You just never know what's going on in somebody else's life. And like, okay, I see you here, I have no idea that you have an amputated leg. I have no idea of your backstory. And so those kinds of things, we don't get a chance to have that in-person interaction with people nowadays in this world of technology. But the one thing I think that kind of the if there's one tiny good element that came out of COVID and forced everybody to work from home, is that we got to see people in their natural home environments a little bit. We got to see those little family interruptions or their dog barking or a cat butt on the camera all of a sudden, but you started to learn about them as a fellow human and see them as a fellow human.
Yeah.
You also got to learn a lot about who they really are and how they reacted to those interruptions. But I always look for the shining light or whatever golden nugget happens in any disaster. And so coming out of COVID, that's what I got out of it, is that we got to learn more about each other, even if we had to be separate and apart. And we are quickly running out of time. Carlos, I just want to remind people your chapter is in volume 16 of Cracking the Rich Code. Your website is carloshoyos.com. And if people want to connect with you, they can do so on LinkedIn, and those links will be in the show notes. We've got 30 seconds. Anything you want to wrap up with, my friend?
I just want to thank you for this opportunity and remind people that things will happen. Once you get to the gratitude, things will become a lot easier.
I love it. And I love your fortitude. So thank you for